Hey everyone, and welcome to the Soul Star Cafe. My name is Ruth Perkinson. I'm really happy everyone is here watching this interview with my friend Tom Coates. He is an amazing teacher and a guide for me. Lots of wisdom coming from his time here on Earth. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about soul rescue and talk about your journey to Krakow. We're going to finish up that story, that's a beautiful story about your journey to Krakow, and anything else that might come up during this conversation, this conversation with you. So, Tom Coates, welcome back to the Soul
Thank you
Star
very much,
Cafe.
Ruth. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So I thought we would start with just this idea of soul rescue with you,
Hmm.
and then maybe go into the journey, finish up that story about that journey to Krakow that we started a few months ago,
Okay.
and give us your wisdom around soul rescue, what that means, and then maybe go into that part of your journey.
Well, the term is, as I think you're using it, is one that was, I believe, created by Bob Monroe back in the 80s. And in the 80s, in the relatively earlier days of the Monroe Institute, they had a program they called the Explorer Program. I was not part of it per se, um, but they had in one of the Explorer uh, episodes there, and the program was built around a sensory deprivation chamber that they created at Monroe Institute. It was not a float tank. It was one where there was an extreme, a very cushioned environment. It was like it was a chamber that was probably the size of almost as big as a small kitchen. On the exterior, it had multiple layers of sound baffling and so forth, so that inside the chamber it was completely free of sound, even from cars out on the road, or they remove all sorts of vibrations and so forth. So it was totally dark and totally free of sound. And uh, and people would go in the chamber and go off on all sorts of adventures, connecting with often with ET vessels and so forth, not on necessarily on Earth, but out in space, and also all sorts of out of body experiences that were pretty. And in one of these episodes, the woman, I can't call her name, she used to live near the institute, was doing the exploration, and they encountered a fellow that it took a few minutes of discussion to determine what he was, but he was from his perspective, he was a seaman from England, and his ship had taken off from I believe Liverpool or someplace on the west coast of England, and had been, I don't know where they were going, but they were out at sea, and there was a terrible storm that came on, and the ship uh, foundered and sank, and was wrecked by big waves in the storm, and he was hanging on to a piece of debris that from the ship, a piece of wood that kept him floating in the water. And so they got to ask him when it was and so forth. And it turned out that the ship, he gave the date of something, I think it was 1843, that the ship had gone down. And he, of course, did not know. He thought he was talking to somebody in 1843. He did not know that the time had passed. And what had happened was, what was discovered through this process was that this ship, and they actually verified from records in England that the event. The ship had foundered in a storm, and all hands were lost on the ship. And this guy gave his name, and he was one of the crewmen on the ship. And uh, um, but he had been in his consciousness, he had been hanging on to a piece of lumber, ever since the ship went down. He did not, he had passed away, but did not know he had.
That's
And
so
so,
interesting. That I just want to just for a point of clarity, that first of all, that number one, that's so interesting that he's having that experience of
right,
going to that time through the Monroe Institute in that place, right?
right.
And so when he's
Now
going to
that,
that,
and I should say that this was not targeted by the explorer at TMI, the Monroe Institute. It was just something that she was out in the ether, if you will, and heard his voice calling for help. And so she went to the voice, and then they had this lengthy conversation where she got information from him and realized in the course of what was, that he had died and did not know he had died. And so they then, on the spot, they devised a way to help rescue his soul and take him from there to what Bob Monroe referred to as the reception center or the park, um, and, uh, and which in the Christian tradition would be referred to as heaven. And so that's what
how
they did.
beautiful. That's really a
Right.
beautiful thing to, because it sounds like he was stuck and so he was able to be rescued. That's what soul
Correct.
rescue is all about. Yeah.
Correct. Right. Yeah. And this gave rise to an area that was previously unexplored by Bob Monroe, and gave rise to us. They, to this day, I believe they still have courses at the Monroe Institute, uh, teaching how people how to engage in this sort of practice, the soul rescue practice.
Right. And you do some training there yourself?
Not in that, no, but I have done that. I've done that in this lifetime
Yeah.
on my own, and
Right.
so um, and there were, by the way, there were when the first time I think this was tested on a large scale was following the Oklahoma City bombing in 1996, I believe that was, or 95 or 96. Um, and there were roughly, and what the experience has shown that when people die suddenly without warning, that's the most likely time when the soul gets stuck in in the physical realm, um, because the person does not know he or she has died. And so, um, uh, I think there were around 150 some people that died in the Oklahoma City bombing.
Hmm.
And the Monroe Institute in the 90s organized teams of people who went out, uh, uh, went targeted the Oklahoma City bomb site to see if there were souls that were stuck in place there. And they discovered that roughly half of those who had died were stuck there, and they
Right.
rescued all of them.
Right. It's so interesting. And because what I sort of flashed on when you were, even prior to the Oklahoma City, I was flashing on 9/11,
Right.
and that there must have been a lot of work done there because it's such a deep,
That
spot.
was the Oklahoma City bombing was a warm up for 9/11.
Yeah.
Although, as a percentage, my understanding is that there were not nearly as many stuck in 9/11 because by the time most of the people died, they knew that their death was imminent. Whereas in Oklahoma City, it was just out of the blue, an explosion, and
Right.
people died instantaneously.
Right. I gotcha. So this is a beautiful teaching and tool and technique for people to be edified about, I feel,
Right.
educated about. And that's what we're doing here today. And so I find it fascinating this your journey to Krakow, 1943. You had that conscious
Mhm.
awareness, and you went in for some soul rescue there. And we talked about this in our first video back in January, but I wanted to kind of go back there and finish up any maybe loose ends around that story, just sort of pick up where you might feel is good to talk about your own
Okay.
experience of soul rescue. Yeah.
I'm not sure where we left off, but we can focus on this part of it. And
Yeah.
as the background was that I was on my first trip to Poland in early spring of 1994 with my previous wife and our child who was at that time 18 months old. And we were on a train ride from Warsaw to Krakow. She was going to show me around Poland a little bit. And a few minutes into the train ride, I was taken into what I recognized was an altered state of consciousness, and what it turned out to be an alternate reality, being on a train 50 years earlier, or 51 years earlier, in the spring of 1943, as a Jewish orphan from the Warsaw Ghetto, and the destination ended up being Auschwitz. Or, what would the Jewish part of Auschwitz was actually Birkenau, Birkenau. And I was taken off the train. I was 11 years old. Had been living as a scavenger since I was 7, since the ghetto had opened up, and had been an orphan since birth. So I was scrawny and undernourished and undergrown, and I got taken off to the gas chamber along with the old and infirm people on the train. Those that will look like they would be good for slave labor were taken off to be slave labor. And so anyway, in the chamber, after going through the process of the anteroom where you're stripped naked and all your possessions are taken away from you, um, in the chamber, as soon as the gas uh, came on, the Zyklon B started coming through the uh, through the sprinkler system in the ceiling of the room. There are probably 200 or so people in the room with me. Um, I realized almost instantaneously that we were being killed, and uh, and 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 at 11, and having lived the life I had lived, um, I was perhaps not as attached to my physical body as many of the other people in the room who were older and so forth, much older. Most of them elderly, or 50s and up. And so I left my body almost immediately and was hovering in the room. And as I was hovering, and this was, and again, I want to. It's difficult when I first had this experience. I was in the consciousness of this child whose name was Moshe, and as this event, as all the way on the train ride and getting off, I was very conscious of him and me as separate entities. Once this event started occurring, there was a merger of our two consciousnesses where I really could not distinguish one from the other. And
Wow.
in any event, I or Moshe, well both of when he left his body, he was hovering in the ceiling, and realized pretty quickly that um, almost everyone in the room did not know they were dying. They were, of course, they'd been told to get us. We had been told to get us in there that you're going to be deluxed with this
Right.
special solution. And so people were in all kinds of denial, and so the first thought was to alert them to the fact that they were dying. It was time to leave their bodies and move on. And as that crystallized in consciousness, all of a sudden, Moshe and I saw that the room itself, the chamber, was completely jam packed with thousands upon thousands of other souls who were stuck there because they had died there and did not know they had died. And so, what almost instantaneously became the most, perhaps the most important moment of Moshe's life was to try to rescue those souls from that gas chamber. And and so he went around, out of body, but working at the soul level with all the people in there and with the other souls that were already stuck there,
And
and it
yeah. I
was
just
just
wanted to mention how I just want to stop you for a minute because I'm getting emotional, honestly, how beautiful this young boy. I just wanted to hold some space there because what a
I
beautiful thing to do to be
get
helping these.
emotional when I talk about it myself.
Yeah,
But
I'm really getting and
yeah,
feeling that energy of emotion of how
right,
sweet and how the innocence of a little boy would people would follow that. They would follow his beautiful innocent soul. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that while we're
right.
talking. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and so the visual looking at it now and the sense of it then was that he was moving around the room like a tornado,
Right.
very, very quickly, but also vocally in an out of body way, to try to stir up all the energy in the room, all the souls there, to alert them that it was time to get out of there, and move
Right.
on.
Right.
And so uh, and it ended up leading leading them out in a line. It was like the Pied Piper of Hamlet in a sense, more, more more positive for a more positive outcome than the Pied Piper of Hamlet.
Right.
But in any event, leading them out of there and leading them up to again what Bob Monroe refers to as the reception center, and there was this line going all the way from connecting that with the uh, with the chamber, and Moshe had to make 3 or 4 trips back to the chamber to get all of them out of there.
Right.
And there were, I don't know how many there were, but there were thousands in there.
Mhm.
And it was a very, very powerful experience, for Moshe, for me, and for all others that were concerned as
Yeah.
well, I think.
Yeah, so I think there's so much gratitude for your, I would call it that soul, that energy, that fearlessness, that love to help and be so helpful to all those souls. And this brings me into this idea of how we never die, really. We
Right.
reincarnate, we learn our lessons. And so what we were talking about the last time was how in this lifetime, you have been meeting up with some of those same souls that Moshe rescued in 1943.
Well, I may have. I had, as I mentioned in the written version of the story, uh, several years later, in fact, 10 years later, I was and in the meantime, by the way, one of the things that triggered this experience again. The first trigger was a train ride to Krakow, which was the same train track that the trip had been on from Warsaw to Auschwitz 51 years earlier. But um, in 2001 or two, I can't remember the exact date, was when the movie The Pianist came out. And in that movie, there were, if anybody who's seen it will remember, it's a Roman Polanski film, really well done. It was about a fellow, Adrian Brody was the actor that played the pianist. Um, and uh, and there was a pre-war segment to it that was relatively short or shorter. Then there was a post takeover post. It was in Poland, set in Warsaw, and then there was a ghetto portion, Warsaw ghetto portion, because the pianist character was Jewish and was in the ghetto for until he escaped 2 or 3 years into the stay there. And then there was a post-ghetto portion that came to the end of the war, and uh, and the ghetto. When the ghetto portion came on, it triggered this whole experience again. I literally was not able to sit and continue watching the film. It was that I had to go out and sit in the lobby of the theater and process it all over again, and then go back in. It was and I had to go see the movie again later to fill in the
Wow.
missing part. But
Wow.
yeah, it was very powerful. Um, but in 2003 or 2004, I did a week long seminar, Brian Weiss seminar on a training of how to on past life regression training. In other words, to do past life regression,
Mhm.
hypnotherapy, and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Same training Carol Lewis had, and and about yeah, there were 125 to 130 people there. It was at the Omega Institute up in Rhinebeck, New York, and I'd been up to the Omega many times, and I heard about Brian's seminars. He really does a wonderful program up there, and
Yeah, yeah.
He does them in other places too, but I've heard on many people say that the ones he does at Omega are more, in some ways, more personal, more intense than most of the others he does. Anyway, the uh, 2 days into it, he wanted people to practice the techniques, and there was a so he had people pair off with, well, he had created small groups, and then within the group, you paired off with somebody for for practice round, and and you were supposed to be in a group in which you didn't know anyone else, and and which was easy for me because I didn't know anyone there anyway. But uh, so the uh, well, I take that there was a doctor friend that I'd gone with, but he and I were in different groups. So in any event, I paired off for the first exercise with a woman who was a therapist, psychotherapist from Long Island, and and she asked me to be this. She wanted me to be the first subject. In other words, she would induce me and so forth and so on. And so it proved a bit challenging because she had no idea how to do any sort of hypnotic induction. She'd never experienced it or been exposed to it apparently in her entire practice career, and and she was, I'd say, about early 50s, something like that, and so although she did not want to be the first subject, she didn't know how to do the induction, and so I had to lead her step by step. I had and I'm a terrible hypnotic subject to begin with. Um, my dad, was a fairly renowned in the world as a hypnotist. He was practiced with not practice. He had been Milton Erickson had been a mentor of his in that regard. He'd done it a lot of it ever since World War II, and he was really great at it. He said I was the most difficult subject he ever encountered in his life. So anyway, so I had my eyes closed and was telling this lady what to tell me, and then I was responding to what she said after I told her what to say, step by step through the whole process. And so I said, well, this is a little bit of a difficult situation. It's going to be difficult for me having to run both sides of this of this exercise to explore something I've never been to before. I think I'll go to something that I have some familiarity with. So I went back to the experience of the train ride to Krakow and went through that experience and was really a wonderful exercise because in the course of it I got a lot more detail for the whole thing and in particular got more detail about the soul rescue aspect of it and how extensive it had been and that was the tail end of it of the whole session and then as I finished up that part of it I was saying while being the hypnotic subject, was saying, well, I've got to hurry now because my next lifetime is starting in just a few months, and I got to get this one closed out so I can go ahead and make preparation for that one. That
Right.
being the one I'm in right now, and so and so and
There's a
so
lot
I
that goes on between lives, right?
right, right. And so anyway, I opened my eyes, and this woman was just her. She was just her face was covered with tears, and I asked her, I said, what in the world's the matter? And she says, Tom, she says, I was born in London. I'm of Jewish background. I have been struggling my entire life with memories of dying at Auschwitz. And she says, I came here to this seminar in hopes of somehow reconciling and resolving some of those horrific memories. She says that 125, 130 people in this room, how is it that I pair off with a total stranger who is probably the only person in the room who has an experience like mine, you know?
Hey, Tom, I just want to, because I'm getting very teary-eyed with this part, and I just want to hold a little sacred space for you and that woman. Do you remember her first name? Do you remember?
I'm sorry, I do not. I
That's
do not.
okay. But
Yeah.
so what I'm hearing is that she was one of the souls that Moshe rescued.
That's what, I didn't ask her that at the time, and she might not have even known to how to answer if I had. But as I was on my way home after that week, that was the conclusion that came into my mind, you know,
Yeah, that
that,
really feels spot on. It
right,
feels like
right,
a true
right,
soul healing, and you guys
right.
reconnected in that way. That's really a beautiful story, and I love it. Love that story.
Yeah, the interesting thing was when she became the subject and I was the inducer. Um, she did not want to go to the Auschwitz experience. Um, I said, well, if you don't want to do that, let's go back, take you back to a very, very pleasant and satisfying lifetime that you had. And she went she went to a lifetime in the mid 1800s in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and and where she was a mother of several children and so forth. They had a very, very happy life. She lived right next to the most famous Buddhist temple, which is in Thailand referred to as a Wat, W-A-T. And I was very familiar with the Buddhist Wat that she was living next to. And so it was uh, because I lived in Thailand um, in the for a year in the army, traveled all over the country, and realized the moment my feet touched the earth there that I had many, many lifetimes that I had lived there, especially several as a Buddhist monk. And it proved even her regression into a pleasant lifetime proved to be one where there was a sense of connection between us. It was very, very interesting.
That's it.
Um,
That's incredible to for people watching this to truly understand that we have multiple lifetimes here on Earth. We have maybe other lifetimes on other star systems, you know.
oh yeah, absolutely.
And anyway, so let's go ahead and finish that part, and then anything else that you want to bring
Well,
up? Yeah.
in that, what I want to bring up is that that I I thought that that thing that occurred at Omega Institute in 2003 or four was perhaps the final chapter of that event, but it proved not to be. I had, as I may have mentioned previously, I'd asked in channeling sessions thereafter whether it was I or was it Moshe who knew how to do the soul rescue work, because I had not received the training, but I was very familiar with the concept from my exposure to Bob and Roe, and had actually done it in this lifetime on occasion, and um, and the answer was that if I could have brought that technique back to Moshe from this lifetime to his by being there on the, but that it wasn't necessary because he already knew how to do it. And now in 2019, um, there was a couple that came over to my house one night for dinner. It was like a Monday or Tuesday evening, and and we had a very pleasant dinner. I won't mention their names, but you know both of them. And um, and and we had a very pleasant evening. And then eating in my kitchen where I'm sitting right now, and at the end of the evening, we got up. They got up to go, and then the fellow. I had not met the woman before. I've come to know her very well since then. But the woman, the fellow said, "Tell her that story about the Jewish lifetime in Poland." And I said, "Okay." So we were standing around my kitchen table here, and she was to my left, he was to my right, and I was standing at the corner of the table, and and told the story, and it was remember being conscious of the fact I was trying to rush through it because we were all standing there, they were trying to leave, but I remember feeling that it was getting more emotional than I had anticipated, and and uh, and then as I finished the story, we looked down, and the entire floor of the kitchen of this half the kitchen, which is roughly 90 to 100 square feet, was covered with water, and there was no plumbing leak. There was no leak from anywhere. No, the water for the dog had not been spilled over, anything like that. Not that it could have covered anything like the area that was covered anyway. You couldn't walk in it. In fact, it was not on top of our shoes, but you couldn't walk in it without splashing it. And when we each picked up our shoes from the floor, there was nothing under our shoes. Then it filled in. It
Yeah.
was one of the strangest things I've ever encountered. And we didn't even think to take pictures of it. All I could think of was, gee, this is going to mess up the floor if I don't get it up. So we
Right.
used up um, a whole roll of paper towels to try to get it up. And uh, and as we completed it, and I tasted, we all tasted it. It did not taste like tap water. It did not feel like tap water. It had a viscosity to it. It had a sort of a organic taste or taste to it, not necessarily salty, but organic in it in some sense. And uh, and what we all got as a download upon completion was what this water on the floor would represented was tears of joy and gratitude from those souls rescued from that gas chamber at Auschwitz. I'm
That
slowing down to
that's
say it because I get so emotional when I say it. It's hard for me to get it
yeah,
out.
I just want to say here that that's an incredible manifestation
Yeah,
of that gratitude.
25 years after 25
20
years after my experience in Poland,
Mhm.
um, and then I I test I got asked in channeling sessions with multiple channels after that for verification, and they all got this, all said the same thing. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah, it
And
really feels like that's
right,
sort of this quantum beautiful manifestation of all of that around that gratitude with these souls, and you repeating the story and telling the story is, and that's why we're doing it today, is we that's
hmm,
a powerful story, Tom. And I'm glad you brought that forward because our people need to hear that we're in this holographic universe, and these
right,
things are playing out, and that the past, present, and future are very malleable.
right,
And when we tune into that energy of that event and all the things. I think that's a beautiful thing for you guys to surprisingly witness this water, this
Right.
emotion of
Right.
water
And
coming
and
up.
the texture of the water was completely consistent with the explanation, I might
Mhm.
say.
Yeah,
It was clearly not tap water. I
right,
tried a few days later to cover the floor. It took more than a gallon of water to cover the floor in the way this had. But it was still much, it was, didn't have the viscosity, didn't have the texture, didn't have the taste that
right,
this other water had at all.
right. Well,
And
I completely 100% believe you, and I know the listeners who have subscribed to this channel will 100% believe you, even, without the scientific research, that was put into
right,
that. Like, I really believe that is a manifestation of that gratitude, that love,
right.
and that healing, that soul rescue, and that soul healing. Beautiful. Wow.
One thing that inspired me to do as a postscript was to start um, on the theory that the gas chambers and the killing areas all over the Reich uh, were full of souls that got stuck there. I started on a personal program after that of transporting myself in time back to 1945 at the end of World War II as these various camps were being liberated to go and do the same thing um, as a time traveler, if you will,
Mhm.
to try to clear those souls that were stuck out of there. And even without that exercise, they would all be gone by now. But as in more likelihood, but but as of the end of the war, they were still there and could have been there in some instances for years and years. And and my theory was and is that those negative forces that want to keep us as polarized as possible, can use that energy of those trapped souls in a way that would not be desired by the souls themselves or by the rest of us. And so I started this process of doing that. I don't know I have no way of measuring what its impact is, but I have been told from channeling sessions that I've been successful so far at about removing 25 to 30% of them from the whole Third Reich.
That's incredible, and that's such a quantum healing. I really feel like this is what we're talking about is quantum healing, the soul rescue, and having this kind of conversation to help people really understand that we are all of us are helping each other through the very, very difficult and challenging times that we have
Mm-hmm.
through this holographic universe of time and space.
Right.
I wanted to ask you while we're at this point, about if it's okay with you, to talk a little bit about your connection. I really feel like you are a time traveler, and we're all traveling through time, and we're all meeting up with each other to help each other. I also wanted to mention, since we're in this year of disclosure, the next couple of years, next 10 years, I'm really feeling it more and more, our connection to our galactic family. And I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to just ask you if you wanted to share a little bit about your experience there.
Well, when I was first when I was a teenager and was first uh, um, let's see introduced by my guides to them as such, I was I was I was hearing voices in my head from the time I was about 3 years old. Um, I had the wisdom not to mention it to anybody, otherwise I, I probably would have had a much different life than I've had. And and when I was just after my 16th birthday, I had a very profound NDE like out of body experience where I was taken into another realm and by my guides and was introduced to them and and they uh, were very clear that time as we know it is not is just a localized phenomenon, and that in the realm that souls occupy, there's no time. That all time is happening at once, and so that you can travel anywhere in time at any from anywhere in time and anywhere in space. They said space is an illusion, just like time is an illusion. There's no death; it's only life. It's what we think of as physical death is just an illusion, and it was quite a heady lesson for a just turned 16-year-old who was worried about issue with my best friend's girlfriend. so,
Right,
so,
exactly. Yeah.
so anyway, um, I was introduced to that, and I was also from the time I was very young, I was also very keen on the idea of connections with other planets and so forth, and I know my dad used to enjoy taking. He and I would go out in the yard. This is back in the 40s, when there's still the you could still look up in the sky and see the stars within inside or on the outskirts of the city, and um, and and he would point out the various constellations, the uh, the Pleiades and the seven sisters of the Pleiades and all that, and 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 I would always say, well, I have other homes up there, and more than one of them, and and it would be it made him very nervous because it wasn't part of his perspective, and so, but I always said it. I knew it made him nervous, but I also said it with all seriousness, and I'd learned through channeling that one of the reasons for my confidence about that was that I started making connections with friends from other planets as early as 3 years of age, and where I'd been and done previous cycles, like in the Pleiades and Arcturus star system, and another particular one where there's a Jupiter-like planet there's a gaseous species of beings that would apparently I have concurrent lifetimes going in that group right now, and so I've always had a deep sense of connection with other planets, with other beings from other planets, and um, excuse me, I've got some sort of screen coming up.
Okay.
It's
Well,
going.
you're doing okay here, so you're
Yeah, yeah. It was something they want to rejigger something on my computer here. So I said do it an hour later. So anyway, I've always had a sense of connection. I've always, as I've mentioned to you, one time I went to I was being seen by a person who was an angel reader, and I'd never done that before. And she said, "Well, I don't see any angels, but I see seven different ETs around you, and they seem to be they're all different species from different planets. They all say you're their representative or one of their representatives on Earth." So,
yeah.
well, that seems
Yeah.
completely compatible with my outlook. So,
Yeah. You do feel like an ambassador in that energy of that ambassador energy coming from that particular group, that
mhm,
those seven. Yeah.
right. So,
Well, I,
so
I
what?
love that. I feel a connection myself personally. I'll just jump
Mhm,
in and say I do feel a connection to the Lyran star system, which is very cat-like,
mhm,
and to the Pleiades as well and Arcturus. I have felt some of that energy in and around me as well. So I just wanted to
right.
share that with you that I think we are connect. Probably what I'm feeling is we've made those connections here, and we have them there as well. Because really,
Oh, I'm
we
sure
are
that's probably
non-local
true.
beings. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And one of my deeper sense of connections comes to uh, uh, the Andromeda galaxy. Um, the one of the earliest lifetime that has spontaneously come into my consciousness of my own is in Andromeda about 2 billion years ago, and the whether I can't verify it at this point. Maybe at some point there'll be some way of some level of verification. But what I was involved in there was being an engineer on the Earth Moon project, and uh, in that lifetime, uh, I was a participant in building um, what is now the moon above our Earth. That was brought here to help terraform planet Earth because at that time it was so unstable that nothing could live here except bacteria.
Right.
It was too unstable for higher life forms to evolve here.
That's an incredible memory. And it also
Yeah.
feels, interestingly, it also feels like it's going on quantumly. So we have this sense in the Earth plane of this linear time, but I think
Hmm.
really what we've been speaking to in this whole conversation is this quantum
Oh yeah.
sort of holographic observation on the
Right.
observation deck of our lives. We're seeing these connections we've made through time and space. And I love the idea that we're really bringing forward in this conversation about that we really don't die, that life continues on. And I think
Right.
we're all overcoming that fear around the death process and
Right.
making it more of an experience of yeah we're here and we move on from these physical bodies, we molt, we transition, all the things. But I think one of the things that really has hit me most in this is that sense of that quick death that we're not expecting,
Hmm.
and to have somebody like you and others who can go in and do a soul rescue to let them know, hey, like, you've this is what's happened, and then that helps these beings go up to that higher realm so they can they have
Yeah,
that awareness, that understanding.
I had experience of that a number. I don't know whether I mentioned this in the first uh, time we talked or not, but I had a friend named Paul who lived in the States for a number of years, and then he had previously been married, and he was of German origin. He migrated to South Africa, got married down there, had a couple of kids, and then came. And then his marriage ended. He came to the U.S. and lived in Atlanta for a number of years. And he was very, very spiritually engaged. He was also very engaged with ET stuff. He believed he was a had been a starship trooper for a gray alien group that got that got uh, taken by another species and sent to Earth as a sentence for violating their territory. You know, sent for a cycle of incarnations on Earth, keep him out of harm's way for the other group. Whether that's true or not, he was very, very, very fearful of getting stuck after he died. That was an abiding fear he carried around with him all the time, and he was very much aware of that as a how people get stuck as ghosts, you know. And so um, he went back to South Africa in the early 2000s, and in 2004, 5, and so forth, and his uh, his second marriage in Atlanta had ended. His first wife said, "My parents have just died. They had a several thousand acre uh, game preserve north of Johannesburg, and he said, she said, will you come back and run it for me?" And he said, "Yeah, that's fine. Sounds fine. I'd like to do it." So he went back and living on a cottage on the place, and it went very well for a number of years. In 2013, I believe, or maybe 2014, one or the other, um, a mutual friend called me and said, "I want to tell you that Paul uh, passed away yesterday in Johannesburg, where he lives on this game preserve. He had just gotten the story I got was he had just gotten um, up in the morning. He walked out of the cottages on the property where he lived, and there was some racial tension going on. There was a couple of fellows walking down there, and they were angry at white people, and so well, they just out of the blue, one pulled a gun and shot him in the head from behind. It didn't even know. It didn't even have a chance to confront them or be confronted by them before he died. And I thought, wow, this is exactly, he has drawn to himself
Yeah.
exactly what he
Right.
feared the most. and so um, I was I was already scheduled to have a channeling session that afternoon, and I ended up using it as a template, as a launching pad, if you will, to go and have a and catch up with my friend. And I found him standing right outside of his cottage there north of Johannesburg. He had no idea he died, and we had not talked in a decade or so, but we had a really nice catch up conversation during which I informed him what had happened, and and then and he was totally surprised and didn't had no idea that he again had passed away, and so once that was once we got through all that, we then had a well, I then accompanied him up to the reception center and had a
To
nice
that
spot.
to that higher realm. Well,
Right.
we're actually gonna stop on, I think this is a great place to stop, I feel,
Okay.
with your beautiful, you are a story a minute. I just really feel that. I could talk to you all day, but we have a limited time on this.
Yeah, I know.
But I really, I just want to say thank you for your, it feels like I'll just say the word, it feels like it's a mission. It's part of your mission here on Earth as an ambassador to for soul rescue
Mhm.
and time traveling, and that you really are a beautiful time traveler helping souls um, on their journey. And at the same time, it helps us on our journey. And so I really appreciate you. Tom, you have a beautiful group called the IONS here
Mhm.
locally in Richmond. I think you're the oldest running chapter on planet Earth, it feels like to
Well,
me.
well, not the oldest, but we're the longest continuously operated chapter.
Longest continuously operating. And you have
And we're in our
once
31st year now.
31st year, yes. And so
Right.
you've got once a month you have a beautiful speaker coming in, sharing all the things, bringing science and
Right.
spirituality closer together. And I love that about you. And so next month in May, you've got Carol Louie, and I
Right.
believe she's going to be in May, right? And she's going to be
Correct.
also this story to Krakow. She's going to be putting that in a film she's producing about that time during the Holocaust and soul retrieval, soul rescue, all the things that are so important for us to learn about. Any final thoughts before and I'll put all the links in the description box of how people can find you and all the things we've talked about, Monroe Institute
Mhm.
and even Brian Weiss and all the things. But I think having this conversation, people might want to reach out and connect to you, if that's okay.
That's fine. That's
Yeah,
fine.
that'd be
Well,
great.
I would just, thank you for the kind words about my work, but I think at the soul level,
Mhm.
that's what we're all doing.
That's what we're all
And
doing.
uh, we have, we do have these, and by bringing ourselves into the physical level, we are, in my judgment, and my observation, we're the cutting edge of creation. You know, those who we don't need to feel separation from creation because we are it,
Yeah,
and it doesn't mean that we are almighty,
right.
but collectively, we're all part of integral parts of the God that everybody wonders about, and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
And at
I
the so
feel.
and our lives, our lifetimes, which are important to us at the personal level while we're in them, in the larger scheme of things, are like this shirt I'm wearing, or this, or the, we put on these lives so we can have a short moment of creative self expression, and the vehicles we use, meaning the lifetimes we use, are just vehicles for that.
Well,
We
that's a
all knew
beautiful.
that,
Yeah,
and knew that love is what glues us all together. You
right,
know, we'd all be much happier.
right. I think that's a beautiful note to end on, Tom. Love is the glue, and I think you've brought so many beings together with all the work you've been doing. So there's a lot of gratitude for you, and so thank you. And we'll have you back on. Is it
Thank
okay to
you.
have you back on from time to time?
I'd love to come back.
All right. Well, I'm excited by that. Let me find the stop button here, and God bless you, Tom Coates. See you soon.
God bless you as well.